Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Love to see who's here in the room. If folks want to pop a little hello into the chat and who you're here with, representing today, what your role in the ecosystem is, where you are. We'd love to say hello to everybody, and we'll have some time after the presentations to do some Q&A. So my name is Sandra Kwok. I'm the founder and CEO of 10 Power. We are a climate justice organization that's working with frontline communities on renewable energy projects with a workforce development and gender equity lens, helping communities to build, own, and operate renewable energy projects. And I'll pass it over to Matt and then Marcus to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Sandra. Matt Eldridge. I'm the executive director of Realize Impact. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that functions as an intermediary in the impact investing space. We aspire to make it very easy for an investor donor to use a donor advised fund or family foundation capital to fuel an impact investment through us and be able to harvest the returns back to their DAF or foundation. I'm happy to explain more in just a little bit.
Over to you, Marcus.
I am Marcus from Hertz. I am technical scientist, engineer, CTO, but here I'm representing an investor perspective. I am an angel investor, but I'm also a big in philanthropy for climate change. And I have gone through the process of making an investment into 10 Power through Realize Impact, and happy to talk about that.
Living proof of the model. It works. So I'm super excited. Thank you both for being here, and thank you everybody who's joining us online today. I'm excited to share a little bit about 10 Power and our background and our work. We are working on climate justice through renewable energy. I founded the company in 2015, so it's our 10-year anniversary this year. We've been focused on the last number of years on developing projects with Native American tribal communities, and we are focused mostly on renewable energy projects, but we've been getting pulled a lot into regenerative agriculture projects at the nexus of energy sovereignty, water sovereignty, and food sovereignty. And we bring a gender equity and workforce development lens to everything that we do. Our mission is 100% renewables for 100% of humanity, working in service of a planet that works for all living things, our beautiful Mother Earth. Some of the big projects that we did in Haiti, where we originally launched, were solar on UNICEF Haiti's headquarters. This was actually the largest solar plus batteries installation on any UNICEF base in the entire world at the time of installation in 2018. During the pandemic, we built a solar-powered water desalination plant in conjunction with Give Power, and this is now providing enough clean drinking water for 35,000 people. And the model here was quite interesting. It was originally grant funded, and the community on the island of La Gonave, which is off the coast of Haiti, pays a below market rate for the water, which goes to supporting a local team that is maintaining the plants. Because oftentimes what you see with NGO parachute projects is that they quickly fall into disarray. And if there's not a local ownership and maintenance model, then the projects fall apart. And then it becomes not only a waste of money, but it also becomes a not an eyesore, like a heart sore for the people who live there, that they had this nice thing and now it's basically trash in their community. And so it's very, very important to us that we are creating business models that are supporting jobs and ongoing operations and maintenance for communities. In Haiti, we also launched a women's workforce development program. So we worked in partnership with Haiti Tech University, a leading technical institution in Haiti, to help get women graduates from their solar training program out into the fields. And I'm very proud to report that every single woman who entered this program has been hired by a local solar installer and are continuing to do work in the fields in Haiti. And I think we were a little push on the needle in this direction in Haiti because there were no women solar installers when we first got there. And now the UN bids include a clause for reporting how many women solar installers will be included on the project. So it's really nice to see the world moving in that direction, and hopefully 10 Power having a little bit of influence on it. So we got pretty frustrated in our early days with trying to raise impact capital. It seems like this mythical beast that everybody was talking about impact investing, but the impact investors were really hard to find. And so we came across this instrument of donor advised funds, and we're pretty amazed that there's a bunch of money sitting in donor advised funds that's highly flexible capital. And so working with some of our investors, we helped to launch a Renewable Energy Access Donor Advised Fund, or DAF for short, and published a white paper, DAFs Done Right. And so this for us was really eye-opening, and I'm excited to share how this instrument has worked for us in hopes that others will be able to access and utilize it as well, so that we can really get the impact flowing, especially in this intensifying time of need in this country. So starting at square one, what are DAFs and why are they so popular? So there are many benefits as well as drawbacks of DAFs. DAFs allow any number of entities, families, corporate donors, family offices to create a fund or an account that receives an immediate tax deduction in the year of creation. So let's say you had a windfall year, you sold your company, or you're cashing out some of your equity, and you're going to have a high tax burden. You could create a DAF account in that year and receive a very favorable tax advantage. However, there is no federal limit on how long you can keep the money in that account. So basically, you don't have to give it within any type of time frame to a charity, although it's earmarked for charity. So DAFs are sitting, a large percentage of DAFs are sitting in capital markets and are not being allocated out to philanthropic causes. Another benefit of DAFs is that a variety of assets, real estate, crypto, stocks can be donated to DAFs. And they're a highly flexible and creative instrument. So working with entities like Realize Impact and Impact Assets, who we're working with, they can be used to actually do impact investing in for-profit mission-driven organizations. So 10 Power is an LLC with a B Corp certification, and utilizing DAFs, we're able to leverage through Realize Impact and Impact Assets this capital for impact investments into our entity. Same can be done for other for-profits. But despite all of this flexibility and ability with DAFs, the majority of the capital is sitting with three large brokerages, Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard. And the brokerages have no incentive to get the donor advisors to put that money towards charity because they're making brokerage fees off of the capital. So usually it's invested into capital markets. The brokerages are keeping the fees and the interest and any equity that's earned on them, and they're stagnating. And society needs this money. So in many cases, they may be invested in ETFs or in stocks that are causing the problems that the investors got the tax write-off because they're supposed to be solving those problems. So there are some issues with DAFs, and now really is the time to be putting this capital to work. We are experiencing, I'm sure I don't have to tell you, what the impact sector is experiencing right now, these severe attacks by the federal government on industries across the board. And so if DAFs were waiting for a rainy day to invest this capital, it is thunderstorming right now. It is time to move this money into impact. Over the last number of years, DAFs have experienced seismic growth. So in 2019, there was $121 billion in DAFs. It's estimated now in 2025 that there are over $250 billion in DAFs. This is a 400% increase over the past 10 years. And we're seeing that they're tax advantaged, they're really good for investors. So of course, people are going to be putting their money into DAFs, but as much as they can have a positive impact, they can also have quite a negative impact on society. So Project 2025 was funded. We're not sure exactly how much money, but the reported money that came from the three large brokerages was 171 million that went towards Project 2025 through 68 different groups. And this went into the Heritage Foundation, the Atlas Project, which published Project 2025 and a number of other similar roadmaps in other countries for dismantling democracy and social services. So DAFs can be used as anonymous vehicles, which can be both a positive as well as a negative for dark money to flow towards political causes. So with this being the dark side of DAFs, we strongly advocate that they can be equally be used to create positive impacts for society. And DAFs can and should be used for climate justice and democracy, for protecting our civil liberties and our First Amendment rights, our continuing work with climate change and frontline communities. And really, if there was ever a moment, now is the time. We need this capital to help protect our democracy, because without free speech, none of these issues are going to be, we're not going to be able to stand up for any of these issues. It's really quite critical, with the United States as one of the world's largest polluters, to be able to implement policy that is going to keep us from continuing to fall over the brink of climate change. And as we've seen with increasing recent disasters, that climate change isn't going away regardless of what politics thinks. Historically, DAFs have shown themselves to respond to crises. So during the pandemic, there was a big boost in DAF giving, with the largest increase of 20% going to human services that were responding to the COVID pandemic. And I'm hoping that we'll see a similar boost right now with our crisis in democracy and political leadership. Now we'll get into a little bit of the mechanics of how a DAF works. So a contributor or donor can put tax advantage capital into a DAF. So you could create your own DAF if you already have a DAF. You can put money into it, or you could put money into an existing DAF, like the Renewable Energy Access DAF. And then that capital can be lent or invested or granted through any number of mechanisms. We really love the forgivable loan or recoverable grant mechanism, because that allows the impact investment to be recouped according to certain terms. And then once that investment, if and when it's recouped, it can be returned to the fund and continue to be reissued for more projects. So as opposed to a one-time philanthropic grant, this capital can continue to circulate and create a virtuous spiral and activate more and more projects. Now, it's easy as well for existing money in a traditional DAF to be invested. So it's quite simple to deploy capital. Realize Impact has it all figured out. And if you have an existing DAF with Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, or any other number of DAF holders or brokerages, you can create a forgivable loan or recoverable grant through Realize Impact, make that impact investment, and have it returned either to your existing DAF or to a different DAF as well. And Matt can speak more in depth about this process, as well as Marcus, who just went through it. So here are some examples of what we've been able to do with DAF Capital and how we could use more DAF Capital to activate projects. So Haiti, if you've been following the news there, experienced a presidential assassination. Gangs have taken control of the port, stopping the flow of fossil fuels throughout the country, which means not only can people not get anywhere or generate power, they also can't generate electricity for their water pumps to be able to have clean drinking water in homes. And so the situation there has been getting more and more crucial and dire. And we actually, in the midst of all of this insecurity and instability, were able, through the bravery of our local partners, to install solar on a local clinic with a maternity ward. And this project was directly supported by both the Renewable Energy Access DAF and Sierra Club donors. And our team actually had to sneak the solar panels in on an ambulance to get it out to the region. And we're really incredibly grateful to our partners on the ground that this clinic now has reliable electricity to be able to continue serving the community. A project that we are currently implementing, the solar panels just got installed, is a resilience hub at Pine Point Community on the White Earth Reservation, which is in northern Minnesota. And this is a resilience hub at a tribal school that also serves an elderly gathering center. It's going to be a 0.5 megawatt of solar and 2.75 megawatt hours of energy storage. It's the largest installation that this utility has ever seen. So we've done a lot of negotiation with this local rural co-op. It will serve over 300 White Earth Nation tribal members. It's walking distance to their homes if there is an emergency and power goes out, and it will also generate more than 100% of the facility's electricity demand during the year. And we're incredibly excited. We're working with Winona LaDuke's organization on this project. I met her out on the Stop Line 3 front lines, trying to prevent a high pressure tar sands pipeline that was being built on tribal territory through the Great Lakes region. And so this is an exciting project because it's not just saying no to fossil fuels, but it's a big yes for the community in terms of energy independence from dirty power. And we got this project safe harbored under the Inflation Reduction Act's ITC, which is the Solar Investment Tax Credit. We also received a government grant, which thank goodness has not been taken away. We are involved in some class action lawsuits for other government grants, which were clawed back. So this was about 50% grant funded, and we're 60% grant funded, and will be 40% tax credit funded. We got a bridge loan, which is a great place for a DAF to play for the project. So this was a below market rate bridge loan for the ITC amount, but Congress is now trying to take away the ITC. So the Budget Act is sunsetting the ITC at the end of 2026. And so these adders are no longer going to exist. So previously there was a 30% ITC base, there was a 10% adder for tribal nations, schools, nonprofits, and churches as tax credits. All of this is going away. So these are places where DAFs could play a very important and catalytic role in the future. And just the breakdown on this project, which was around $4 million, was 1.75 million in grants from the DOE and 1.5 million in ITC. So these are places where for future projects we could definitely use help. The community has requested residential solar as a next step, which Minnesota has very favorable policy for residential solar. And so we've run a scenario where all 500 homes in the community could get a 15% discount on their power bills. And this is in a very energy insecure, one of the highest energy poverty communities in the country with brutally cold winters. This project would be 6.5 million. And if we assume a debt coverage ratio of 1.15, then the capital required in grants to do this project would be 5 million in grants required. So it's a very small amount of that $250 billion in DAF capital that's sitting in markets right now. We've also been doing a lot of work with the native village of Eklutna, which is the tribe that's closest to Anchorage in Alaska. And they're actually the largest landholder in the Anchorage area. But when their land was given back to them, this former US defense site had dumped a lot of toxic chemicals on their heritage lands. And so there's actually trichloroethylene disruptors that are leaching into the water table, which is very close to the Cook Inlet Sound, which goes out to the ocean. And so we've been working with them on strategic energy planning. We've applied for a number of EPA grants to help do cleanup on this area. A great use for this area would be solar, because you can't build houses or buildings that people are going to be in on this contaminated land. And so a solar farm could help the community in myriad ways. It could also be used to solar power decontamination efforts, which is part of some of the grant applications that we have submitted, which no longer exist with the current EPA. And we have helped Native Village of Eklutna do their strategic energy planning, which is all in the context of taking out a dam that was built 100 years ago to help return salmon to the Eklutna Lake and River and watershed. And so looking at this really long-standing ecosystem goal that the tribe has. and thinking about energy planning in that context. And then also thinking about the upcoming issues for the region. So Anchorage is situated in the Rail Belt region, which serves 75% of the state's population with electricity. And there's actually imminent natural gas shortages. Prices are going up right now in 2025 as natural gas production in the region is falling. And so there's vested interest. Murkowski, Mayor Dunleavy, all of these, sorry, Governor Dunleavy, all of these Republican political players are interested in renewable energy, in figuring out how to supplement these declining natural gas reserves. So we had originally proposed a 15 megawatt solar farm power purchase agreement, and we have brought that down now to 1.5 community solar farm because I think the grant capital is a little more achievable. But if anybody wants to give us 30 million in grants instead of 3, we could still make that 15 megawatt community solar farm happen. So total cost for the community solar farm would be 4.6 million. Whoopsie. And that would provide solar to 300 homes or subscribers in the region with priority to tribal members. They would reduce their energy bills by 20%. And y'all know in these cold regions, it's do or die. Having heat in the winter is do or die. And assuming that same debt coverage ratio of 1.15, this project would require 3 million in grants under the current political situation. Alaska has been experiencing freak weather events. So recently, 1 or 2 weeks ago, Hurricane Halong came up through Asia, Japan, and the Philippines and came all the way across the Pacific and hit Western Alaska, and people's homes have been floating away. And what's especially unfair is a lot of these tribal communities, these Alaska Native villages were forced to stop being nomadic and to settle in one place, and were told that their children were going to get taken away if they didn't settle. And so now these villages and these settlements are really on the super front lines of climate change. These homes are collapsing into the ocean, are being impacted by these freak weather events that are happening more and more frequently. And so it's incredibly vulnerable. It's prescient, and these impacts are happening now. We are working with the native village of Port Hayden, and Port Hayden is located in West Alaska. There's Alaska. Port Hayden is right here in Alaska, and their entire freshwater lake emptied into the ocean as a result of erosion. And so this is severely impacting way of living, drinking water, the primary revenue for the village, which is salmon cultivation. Their president of the tribal council, John Christensen, is incredibly creative and dynamic and has looked into a whole lot of different opportunities for the village, including geothermal. So they're located in a caldera. The U.S. military previously, who was also operating on their lands, has done geothermal research, and there is opportunity for geothermal, which is a pretty hefty investment. We won a Climate United grant through the EPA for Port Hayden, which was clawed back by the Trump administration. So we're involved in a class action lawsuit to try and get that capital back, which is not going to happen. And I just find it so strange that I, being a climate activist, am involved in suing the EPA. Who thought that would happen? But here we are today. And we've also helped President Christensen to prepare testimony to Congress. So this is some footage of him talking to Congress about how the community has been impacted by all these changes. And there are a lot of opportunities ranging from massive to very small and tangible for Port Hayden. So currently there's some equipment that is stalled due to tariffs in Canada that was supposed to be coming to them. So we need 1.5 million to get that solar and wind and battery equipment out of Canada to the community. We had plans on a $300,000 grant to do run-of-river hydro planning for them to harvest electricity from their running river. We're working with them on a strategic energy plan, and then geothermal heat pumps are much more accessible. So large-scale geothermal exploration costs about $10 million for an exploratory well, but home or business geothermal heat pumps are only around $40,000 per unit. So that's a place that they could start right now. So this is just a small sampling of the projects and the different sizes and levels and impact that DAFs could plug in with 10 power at. And we have been incredibly grateful for the contributors to our DAF, for the impact that our DAF has been able to achieve. And we'll be sharing out after this webinar the open source documents that we have been using for our recoverable grant or forgivable loan agreements, because they're just a wonderfully flexible instrument that are impact first. So it helps organizations and companies like ours to be able to continue creating climate and community impact without the same types of requirements that VC or private equity would have as an investment. And so with that, I will hand it over to Matt to say a couple words about Realize Impact and your role in the process. And over to you.
Thanks so much, Sandra, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen here. Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, great. I see heads nodding. I'm going to provide just a quick overview of Realize Impact and how we help move philanthropic capital into investments that have a positive social or environmental impact, like 10 Power. And first, let me tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. I'm going to use a lot of acronyms and buzzwords, so feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm happy to explain in plain English. Realize Impact is a 501c3 nonprofit. We started in 2013 with a mission to provide financing to socially impactful ventures that otherwise lack access to conventional funding. 6 years in December of 2019, a group of impact investors got together at the Seattle Foundation. One of them said, "I wish I could make an impact investment easily from my donor advised fund or DAF," as Sandra was talking about. That's when the idea for our philanthropic investment grant, or FIG program, as we call it, was born. And 2 months later, we launched it. And since then, the momentum has been nothing short of exhilarating. And so our purpose in all this is really to make impact investing easy, rewarding, and possible. We do that through 3 programs, but the FIG program, Philanthropic Investment Grants, is just one of those, and that's what I'll focus on today. How does our FIG program work? Well, donors said to make it easy, so we sought to remove all the friction we could find. You can make a philanthropic investment in 3 easy steps. First, make a grant to Realize Impact and recommend an investment like 10 Power. Your grant can come from any DAF, family foundation, or directly as cash, securities, or, as Sandra said, even cryptocurrency. For us, that's only happened twice, but we do offer that as an option. We then conduct due diligence on the investee. When our investment committee approves, we make the investment and become the investor of record. It can be anything impactful, a fund or single company anywhere in the world, any structure, debt, equity, recoverable grant, even revenue-based financing. Then, when an investment generates returns, we then grant 99% back to your DAF, foundation, or to another 501c3, or we can recycle them into another investment. And by returns, we mean any cash flows that are coming back. So any payments or distributions or returns on investment, both original investment plus any gains. We are taking 99% of that and looking and granting it based on your upfront recommendation, typically back to a donor investor's DAF. What are the economics? They're simple. One-time $500 fee per grant that helps cover the cost of our diligence. There's no annual or other ongoing fee to administer the investment. And then by keeping 1% of returns, our interests are aligned with those of donors. In just 5 years, we've moved over $75 million, mostly from DAFs, into more than 400 impact investments. 22 million of this was in 2024 alone. As Sandra noted, there's more than $250 billion sitting in DAFs in the US today, most of which is just parked in Wall Street. And we're helping unlock this capital so it does good in the world through projects like 10 Power. We're agnostic about geography, sector, rate of return, deal structure, etc. As it happens, about a third of our investments are in funds. The rest are in direct deals like 10 Power. Roughly 40% are seeking market rate returns, and the rest, most are seeking below market or even negative returns. About half of our investments are made in equity, about a quarter are debt, and the rest are a smattering of convertible debt, revenue-based financing, and even recoverable grants. When we make recoverable grants, those aren't technically an investment structure, but we track them as quasi-investments. And you may be surprised to hear, often we get the question, well, when you make recoverable grants, how do those work? Because those are just grants that with an hope and expectation of repayment. So how successful could those possibly be? They're not a legally binding obligation to repay. We've actually found tremendous success with them. I would say most of our recoverable grantees have been very on time with their repayments. It's been, I think, a relatively high success rate with those. And I think the biggest reason for that is that the grantees recognize in most cases that if they're able to repay those grants successfully, they can then qualify potentially for future recoverable grant funding. Our investments are largely donor driven, but here you can see a breakdown of impact areas that they seek to address. Reforestation, poverty, and renewables and climate make up the top four categories. But really, for us, it can be any investment that aligns with one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and where our mission can be a fit. Obviously, with the folks at 10 Power, there are multiple levels of impact that are achieved. Also, while I mentioned earlier sort of the three easy steps about making a philanthropic investment, you should know that since we've already diligenced and our investment committee has approved our investment in 10 Power, that as more folks come forward and recommend investing in 10 Power, we can act on those really on the fly and be able to move pretty quickly. And while our investments are donor driven, let me give you an example of a couple we've made in affordable housing, just to kind of give you a quick example. One is in North Seattle, we invested $1 million in the Nook workforce housing project. If all goes well in 25 years, we'll get back 80 cents on the dollar. So this is an example of where an investor donor was willing to support an investment that actually had a loss baked into it of 20% on the original investment, not factoring in the time value of money or the opportunity cost of investing that elsewhere, because she saw the outsized impact that this philanthropic capital could have in a blended capital stack to help make that project happen. So in Spokane, we invested just over $1 million into a refugee housing project. It's a 5-year loan offering 9% interest, so more of a market rate-ish loan. So whatever impact you're seeking, whether it's local, national, or even in emerging markets, we're here to help. 10 Power is a great example of an investment we've made that's addressing not only climate and renewables, but also poverty, racial equity, and gender equity. They're obviously doing great work and led by Sandra. And if you have a DAF or family foundation, we can help you easily turn a grant to us into an impact investment in 10 Power and then be able to harvest returns back to your DAF. I covered a lot very quickly. Happy to answer any questions you have.
And let's pop over to Marcus. I'd love to hear about your experience with the investment, and then we can transition to Q&A after that.
All right, great, thanks. So I want to summarize sort of if there's just one message from me to take away in a nutshell, that if you have a DAF, a donor advised fund, then you can use your DAF funds to invest in for-profit companies to make a difference for your favorite cause. And that's at first, somebody like me, counterintuitive, because DAFs are meant to make donations to nonprofit organizations. And the game changer here, as far as I'm concerned, it's the possible investment in for-profit companies. First of all, why invest in this? So climate change is an important topic for me, maybe the most important right now. So provide funding for climate change projects is what this is about, as far as I'm concerned. I've been supporting various nonprofits in this space, but I also wanted to fund for-profit companies. And 10 Power has a proven track record as one company in this space, making relevant projects happen. And if you know anything about Sarah, then you know she's incredibly knowledgeable, passionate, and tenacious. So I trust that the money is going where I think it should go. Now, why use a DAF? In my case, that's where a lot of my philanthropic money is. As you heard, there is a lot of money. Many people have tens, hundreds, millions, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in DAFs. And traditionally, again, normally meant for donations to nonprofits. As a side note, if you don't have a DAF, I saw a question in the Q&A. It's relatively easy to set one up at Schwab or Fidelity, and then transfer money. It's very often used if you want to have pre-tax deductions before you sell equity, for example. In any case, so as I said, DAFs traditionally cannot be used to give to for-profit companies. You can have, while your money is sitting in a DAF, you can invest that through Schwab or Fidelity, wherever you are, in funds, including in impact investing, EFT fund, EFTs or whatever. However, if you want to be more fine-grained about it and give to an organization like 10 Power, that's not easy to do. Instead, what you can do is use the mechanism we just heard about. And in particular, with Realize Impact, which is a nonprofit, you can make a regular DAF donation or recommendation to transfer money to Realize Impact, which then will make the investment through the various mechanisms we just heard about to the for-profit company that you care about. It's kind of like an umbrella organization that provides funds to nonprofits. Similar mechanisms exist, for example, if you want to make donations to companies outside the US while being tax deductible in the US. And when you make that transfer, that donation to Realize Impact, you have also make an agreement with RI on where the money is to go. And as we heard, you have essentially the option of when the money eventually gets paid back, which I think in most cases happens, it can either go back to the DAF or it can be then reinvested in another organization of your choice. There's a bit of overhead. I think of it like investing in a startup, where you also have an overhead of signing agreements and having perhaps a fee, and there might be profit sharing if you're going through a fund. And I think it's also useful or helpful to think of it as investing in a startup. There's a long-term horizon. This is not something where you expect the money to come back next week and next year. It is risky and has the potential for high payoff. And I went, as you heard, I went through the process with Realize Impact and 10 Power. It was relatively painless, goes relatively fast, and had a positive experience.
Super grateful to you, Marcus. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you also for your investment. Really appreciate it. It's immediately going to work. So thanks. I see a couple of questions in the chat, and if folks also want to come off, Elijah, I think we have the capability to let everybody unmute if people want to raise your hands if you want to speak your question aloud. So first off, how does one begin to think about setting up a DAF. As Marcus mentioned, you could go through the large three brokerages. We set ours up with impact assets, which is 100% invested in impact projects. Matt, you could probably recommend a couple of other channels that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of think about and these are so-called DAF sponsors that offer these DAF products. There are several types, each with their own pros and cons. We work with more than 80 different DAF sponsors around the country, and have a great working relationship with them. In your local community, there is often a so-called community foundation, and one of their sort of bread and butter offerings are DAFs. So that's one option. The community foundations tend to have local insights and connections where they can be helpful, where they've got a unique perspective. Secondly, there are, as Sandra was talking about earlier, some large national DAF sponsors, like Vanguard Charitable, for example, or Fidelity Charitable. They tend to offer a real price advantage given their scale, and often ease of use through their user interface, the ability to deploy grants from a DAF through them is pretty easy, relatively low cost. And there are others like Impact Assets, which do a fantastic job. Impact Charitable is another, where they are very committed to helping you allocate money within your DAF into an impact investment, like in 10 Power. Sandra mentioned 10 Power has a DAF with Impact Assets. So that's definitely another approach. And then finally, there's sort of a new kind of disruptive player in the DAF landscape called Daffy, like Daffy Duck. They're based in Silicon Valley. They offer a extraordinarily low cost DAF. So if you are, for those folks who might be really looking for low cost, Daffy offers a super easy user interface, a very exceptionally low monthly fee as opposed to a percentage of assets within the DAF. And so we've heard from a number of donor investors that they like Daffy just because of ease of use and ultra low cost. So just to kind of give you an idea of the spectrum and some of the pros and cons.
Next question is on whether or not the returns from a DAF could be sent to a different entity than the donor. So, and Winter Chase has their hand up. I think you should be able to come off mute.
Okay. Sorry, I think can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thanks for the presentation. Matt, I don't think I wrote my question out exactly how I wanted to say it, but you had a slide that talked about how returns from your investments could be not only returned to the DAF, but to the donor's foundation or to the donor's nonprofit. Is that the case? And how does that work?
Yeah, no, thanks, Whitner. That's a great question. So one of the ways that we differ, so Realize Impact is not a so-called DAF sponsor, and that's an advantage to us, and we're able to move fairly nimbly and keep our program low cost. One of the ways we help avoid being misperceived as a DAF sponsor is we look to capture upfront a donor investor's recommendation of what to invest in. We also ask for their recommendation on where we should send returns. Typically, donor investors recommend that we just send returns, 99% of returns back to their DAF. So they can reuse it for either another grant they might make, or they might choose to use us to make another impact investment. So that's a typical route. If a donor investor is using a family foundation to fuel an impact investment through us, then they often recommend we send returns to their family foundation. So the key for us is it always has to go to a 501(c)(3). So the capital always must remain philanthropic and charitable in nature. It could be to really any 501(c)(3). So sometimes, not commonly, but sometimes a donor investor might recommend granting returns to their alma mater or to a social service agency, just as examples. And finally, the other choice they have is they can recommend that essentially the grant go to realize impact as a 501(c)(3), and that it would be then they would be recommending a new impact investment to make at that future point. So there's sort of those different options available. Another option, in line with that last one, is essentially someone could recommend an investment in 10 Power. They could recommend that we recycle returns into a new impact investment, and that they would recommend at that future point. And that could be another investment in 10 Power, for example. So there's some flexibility there, but again, we're avoiding being as open-ended. It's with a DAF, it's really open-ended. You can put money into a DAF, you can take a lifetime or never to recommend where grants are made. Whereas with our program, you have to be specific about the investment you're recommending, and then specific about where you recommend we send returns. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
All right, our next question is from an anonymous attendee that says philanthropy has never had a strong presence in community technology investments, but I assume many in the technology sector might give to DAFs and be interested in an organization that could help to diligence and direct community level investment in infrastructure and technology access programming. Some of this could be recoverable and income generating. How might you advise someone with experience in this area get involved with DAFs? Matt or Marcus, do either of you want to field this?
I'm not completely sure what he or she means by get involved with DAFs. If it's starting, creating your own DAF account, that's one. But it sounds like this is which was already talked about, I think, earlier. But if this is a person with experience in technology and nonprofits and community organizations, maybe this could also be interpreted as being an advisor to DAFs, helping or to realize impact, helping find and assess possible grants and investments. And I don't have any particular knowledge there. The smaller ones might be looking for such expertise, and maybe being a liaison between community organizations and DAFs.
And feel free to raise your hands, anyone, if you want to engage in the dialogue. I see one more question from Winter. Feel free to unmute. Yeah, in terms of if there's a greater need for grants and market-based instruments for our Alaska projects, this is a yes and. So there's a role for grant-based money to come into the projects, and then there's also a role for debt. And the grant-based money would be forgivable or recoverable. So, so if the ITC comes back, the portion that was going towards the ITC could be repaid. If a number of different political factors line up, then some of the grant capital could be recoverable, if not all of the grant capital. We put together our Pine Point project with about 60% non-recoverable grant capital and 40% recoverable grant capital. And that was money that came from the federal government, from state organizations, from school-focused organizations. And then moving forward, we can structure projects, especially the smaller scale projects, with a payback for the individuals who are saving money. And so the percentage savings would vary based on how much capital is grant based versus how much capital needed to get returns in terms of the financing. Does that answer your question? It's it's a pretty big menu of options that we have in terms of projects and project financing.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Mike Seo, feel free to raise your hand too. If you want to come off mute, what is the reporting requirement from the project sponsor to realize impact? And is it dependent on what the donor ask is from Realize? Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Great question, and nice to see you, or at least see your question here today. Good to reconnect. So. Yeah, we at Realize Impact, we take a rather agnostic approach regarding reporting, and we really look to both the donor investor and the investee to have a shared understanding of what's desired. So typically, we are relying on investees to simply make available the kind of reporting to us and therefore back to the donor investor that they would to any investor. So we're trying not to impose our own reporting requirements or framework on top of what they might be doing already, but instead are seeking to leverage really what is the reporting that they're already providing. So foremost, we're looking to the donor investor to have comfort with what the investee is offering. And typically that's done before folks even come to us. Um, if I understand your question right, project sponsor can mean a couple of things. It can mean uh, the and what I'm taking that as is kind of, in this case, say 10 power. And is it dependent on what the donor ask is from Realize Impact? I think the answer is yes, but ultimately we're turning around and making that question of Sandra. So if a donor investor comes to us and says, I'd like to fuel an impact investment in 10 power, and here are my hopes or expectations around reporting, we would say, great, please connect with Sandra and see if Sandra's comfortable and has capacity or is in a position to meet those requirements. And if so, then that can be baked into the agreement that we enter into as the legal investor of record with 10 Power. Otherwise, we're really just seeking to provide to donor investors what 10 Power is providing to us as just another investor, which can
And
be substantial.
going through Realize Impact's reporting requirements, I said, hallelujah, because it's what I'm already doing for my existing investors. It fits really well into our annual reporting framework, our impact reporting framework. So it's kind of the opposite of when you get a philanthropic grant that's making you jump through these rings of fire and the reporting requirements are really heavy. You almost have to hire another person just to do the grant requirements. So really appreciate how lightweight and streamlined the reporting requirements are for our existing arrangements. Beautiful. Any other questions? Y'all feel free to raise your hands. I don't see any more in the chat here. A lovely discussion. Keep them coming. We're also available. I'll send out my personal contact information in the follow-up email with our template paperwork. And please spread the word. Help us get out there, because the most difficult part about working with donor advised funds is meeting the donors. So those are the advisors who can release the funds and say where they want it to go. And as you've seen, because these instruments are so flexible, sometimes it's difficult to wrap your head around what exactly can I do with a DAF, because there are so many different options. So I hope that the presentations today have made it a little bit more solidified in terms of tangible and concrete options and impact that you could have with DAFs. And please do feel free to share this information out with folks. We'll send their reporting out as well. And I'm so happy to see all of you. Thank you so much for being here today. All right. Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Have a good
Take
day.
care. Have a beautiful rest of your afternoon.
Bye-bye. Bye, Marcus. Bye, Sandra.
Bye, Matt.